This week on Rockstar Superhero. Vancouver Canada has a habit of birthing bands that absolutely revel in eccentricity. What I find most appealing is that my guests today are really just kind and normal dudes. Hunting Giants came to me via a favorite PR team, and my ears just couldn't get enough. There's a new electricity in their sound that rivals the progressive metal greats of the 90s, and it's my pleasure to make them known to you today. I'm so glad Steve and Brad were able to get in touch with me, and I'm pretty sure we had a great time. At least I did, and based on the smiles during the interview, I'm pretty sure I made the correct read. Join me today as we explore the mythology behind the band's concepts, as well as our understanding of the world we share. This is Vancouver's own Hunting Giants, and you're listening to Rockstar Superhero. I love the band, Hunting Giants. I don't know what
thanks,
it is.
Man.
Yeah, it's gorgeous stuff because you're fearless enough to go back. And I don't know if you know what that means, but I'm an old fat man who really fell in love with rock the way we know it today back in the 90s, right? Because I'm a fair bit older than you guys. And last thing I want to do is lump you into the current, the sort of the latest rehash of the grunge era. That's not what I'm doing at all here. But, growing up or sort of being, in my mid to late 20s at that time was really impactful. I mean, I live in the Seattle area, right? So it makes sense that my backyard is what has deeply affected my life musically. And, your music brings the best parts of those days back into my brain.
Awesome.
So I hope I hope that's a good thing.
That's what inspires us a great deal is, bands from the 90s, from anywhere like Alice in Chains to Tool, Deftones, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I grew up in that era too. I was pretty young in the 90s, but I was there for like the rise and fall of all those bands. So it's good to hear that it's touching the Seattle scene in particular.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, there might be something to do with that whole. There's something in the water here in the Northwest, right? Because you guys are in Vancouver, right?
Yeah, we're actually pretty close by. I bet.
Yeah,
just close to the border here.
Yeah. And so that there's something about, and I know you know this because even though you were much younger than me, but you still remember that era. And there was a period of time where they were fashion people were pushing this whole grunge thing, this grunge look, and the joke in the industry, at least locally, was, I mean, this is how we've dressed from day one. It's going down to the thrift store look, right? And they started associating that look with the sound. And so, I don't know. I mean, you guys don't look like grunge kids, so to speak. But I guess what I'm trying to say is grunge wasn't a thing. It was just rock and roll with a fake bullshit name attached to it.
Yeah, it's true. Well, a lot of the bands around the time when grunge really took off were the opposite end of the spectrum. It was
hair
all
metal?
glam and hair metal and
absolutely
over the top. And I love that kind of music too, right? Like Motley Crue and going way back, Poison
Aerosmith.
And all that. Yeah, Aerosmith. It's great. And it's a totally different vibe that grunge kind of felt like the answer to of let's peel away all this veneer and all this glitz and get to the meat of it, the reality of what you're trying to express with the music rather than just something that you're trying to be, right?
Yeah. I had, excuse me, I'm going to cough. I was in the Navy actually at the time.
Oh yeah.
What?
Yeah, I know.
Crazy.
Look at the hairstyle. But I was in the Navy during the grunge era, and it was really tough for me because I'm from this area. I myself am a former professional drummer. I'm a wannabe, rock star. And I was living in Portland at the time, and I joined the service, and then, 91, everything starts to take shape. And I remember being so upset that it was like, what does it take to be in the right place at the right time? You know what I mean? Because I always seem to miss it by a boatload. But yeah, I guess what I would say is I'm grateful, like I said before, that you guys are advancing the cause, because Hunting Giants is a very cool surprise to me. And I'm so glad I have the PR relationships, because nowadays with so much content online, it's got to be kind of hard to break out,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, well, it's just, we're just expressing ourselves on our own terms, really. We're not trying to fill some sort of expectation that we have, or it's the passion of it, right? Like we're doing this no matter what. We can't imagine
for sure
not doing it.
Making music just for the music's sake, so that it exists, you know? And then like doing our best to work with PR, John Asher, who we're working with, he's amazing.
So great.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we're doing our own thing. We got our Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, got ads going. We're learning all that kind of style of stuff too, because this is the new age where you kind of got to take charge of your own ship. And there's I mean, some people get signed and they get taken care of, I imagine. But I mean, for the great majority of us, it's like we want our freedom too.
Yeah. I mean, you want the PR, you want you want what the signing gets you. The problem is the signing doesn't get you much except sort of a blood contract, because if you are successful, they're going to take it all.
Well, I kind of see, getting signed is, it's this opportunity to sit back and let other people come in and do all the hard work. True. And you can go back and focus on your personal life and your music, and and the idea is that your music should thrive that way. But I feel it breeds a lot of complacency and a lot of ego. You get a lot of
stuff, fingers in your pie.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people changing the formula and being like,
like it should be, it should be difficult to do. It shouldn't be, just record a song in an afternoon and, press it and just go, sit on your pool for the rest of the day. Right. Like it was kind of weird that it worked that way at any time, really.
Yeah.
And this expectation that it should go back to that is a bit naive, I think,
to say a little, and also to be in it for the money is a fool's game, right?
Yeah.
You cannot be in it for that. You have to be in it for the passion. Mm-hmm. You have to be in it for the potential. And it really, I mean, listening to you guys and even talking to you today, the first thing I noticed is that you jump on board and you're happy. You're grateful to be here, and I'm no Larry King. I'm just a local guy trying to prop up bands that I think are special. But it takes a lot of effort on your end to not only be impeccable musicians, but to be impeccable people and to appreciate every step of the journey, because it's about the journey.
You definitely have to appreciate the journey. That's incredibly important. It's like that's all that life is. Right, because once you're done the journey, you're dead, right? So it's like, if you see it like that, right?
Man, yeah. Well, I would actually like to talk about that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no. I the last thing I want to do is get religious. I say this every show, and then I get religious.
Let's do it.
I grew up in the church, so I'm a pretty intensely spiritual dude, but I am not a religious person in that sense, right? Like I'm not like the whole like you must do this, and you know what I mean. I'm not that guy. Obviously, with the occasional F-bomb, I'm probably not the best example of a guy who grew up in the church, but I do believe in gifts, right? I do believe that everybody is given like a fingerprint, and not just like the literal fingerprint, but like there's a spiritual gift. There's an ability that you've received when you were born. And I love what you said a second ago, because it's so important to chase the creative spark that you've been gifted with. You've been embellished with it. And it's so important to take that and run with it, despite what seems crazy on the outside, right? Because people who aren't in the music business or, in the creative business tend to see artists in any form as a bit bonkers, because we're willing to sort of forego traditional behaviors. We don't get normal jobs typically. We're going after the big idea. We're going after the dream. So I guess I it's not so much a question, but I'm wondering, how much does that spiritual gifting, if that's such a thing for you, how much does that affect your life? How much does that lead you down this road?
Sure, if you don't want me talking about this one. So, like, if we take one of our songs, Among Thieves, in the second bridge, like near the end of the song, he's kind of looking back on himself, right? And he's like, and all I see before me stretches out a short and brutal life, and all I could have been is staring at me with large and angry eyes. I'm all I've feared I'd become. And it's like, that's what happens if, like, you're on your deathbed, and I mean, to each their own, but maybe you want to chase like a safe like job, that kind of thing. But there's a version of yourself who has taken the chances, who has overcome the obstacles that you are facing. And that person is someone that you can be, right? So on your deathbed, it's like, that's who's going to be staring at you, is the person you could have been if you would have made different decisions. So it's like that, you got that thing that you're here to do. And if you don't take care of it, it's just going to eat at you. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And it'll get not the last laugh, but the last stare,
Yeah. It's wow. So this is really intense stuff right off the bat. Yeah. It's hard. I mean, this is of course why so many people struggle. They have these midlife crises, right? Because it's hard to, in a sense, succeed in life if you've attached yourself to an outcome. And so many people, and I absolutely, I'll throw myself under the bus. I absolutely have attached my expectations of what I wanted my life to be to so much of what I've done in my life, that when it hasn't ended up looking like I wanted it to look, that I will sit and mope. You know what I mean? That life has passed me by, or I'm too old to pursue it, or what a fool's errand that I ever ran down this road thinking that I was going to do something. So I admire what you're saying, because it is. I mean, right about that is great, because it's such a great reminder that we get one shot at this. I don't care how hard it is. Go work your ass off, because it's not supposed to be easy. The best things are always difficult. There's always a huge learning curve. You never stop paying your dues. Yeah.
Yeah. And success is how you define it. Right.
Right.
And, you're always going to be chasing the carrot that's always just in front of you, regardless of what you're actually accomplishing and what other people can see on the outside. You're always going to be moving your own goalposts and saying, well, yeah, but these 9 things went well, but that last 10th thing is just going to, keep me up at night. And, so success is ongoing. It's how you define it. And, and also with regards to time, right? Like, to put some sort of time limit on however you define success, right? Just because it doesn't happen as soon as you think you deserve it to have, or something like that. You can get yourself down and you rob yourself of the success that you're going to get in the future had you just persisted with it, right?
Yeah.
The whole band thing it's always been a pipe dream for me, right? Like I've been doing this for over 20 years, just in various different bands, and my story is the same as so many other people's. And, I see them when we go out and gig, and we're all we're brothers in arms in a way, right? Cause we know that it doesn't really matter. Like, if this gig goes well, if the next gig goes well, if we get on this festival or whatever, rain or shine, the project is going to continue, because it's not defined on that. It's not about, we are this definition of something and now we're going to go improve it. It's, we're always just exploring whatever the next hill is, right? And over time, with that persistence, you end up, if you look back, that base camp is pretty far away from you, and you have moments where you're like, man, this is a pretty crazy view, right? But then you turn back around, you look at that next rock in front of you, and you're like, how am I going to do this?
Like, right? When we had we finally finished our full-length album Mythos, and we're sitting down with our producer and drinking champagne and actually listening to it back. And we've been writing those songs for like 3-4 years, and it's finally done, and you get to hear it. And it's like looking back and like seeing base camp way far away, and you're like, wow. Like, all of this work, it didn't seem like we were doing anything, slowly, day by day, recording, it comes together. And it's like, even if it's just for the four of us and our producer, it's like, we're going to take this forever.
In hindsight, seeing how much time it took, how much work we put into it, if I could communicate to my past self how much work it was going to be, I'd probably convince myself out of doing it. Right. Right. Because it's like, and at the time, I think I was kind of aware of that anyways, right? But you're not thinking about, you're not thinking about the summit. You're just thinking about the next rock in front of you. And it's like, you just got to get up that next little bit, and then, take as much time as you need, look around, and just go to the next thing. And then, you can't let any sort of stumbles or failures, bring you down and for too long, make you give up, right?
Yeah. It's true, and success begets success, right? You have to. Indeed. In other words, what I mean is as you move forward slowly, this idea of, let's say here's your goal, right? Mm-hmm. And then you spend the next 100 days working towards that goal. As long as you do 1% a day, you'll achieve the goal, which means you can actually do 3 things a year. Right? If you actually try to do, the equivalent of 1%, whatever that is. But I guess what I'm trying to say is yes, it's the constant persistence and progression and moving forward, and not letting your failures that are occasional push you back too far or stop you from going. You have to keep going.
Or even what your definition of what that success is. Right. You shouldn't let that be your driving force, because it's going to fail you, right? You're going to get to that point where it didn't work out the way you thought, and you're going to second guess it, but that's,
or you get it and then you're like, what do I do now? It's like, I caught the rabbit.
And as long as you continue ahead, then you'll continue with some sort of momentum pushing you forward. That when you have those moments of weakness, it's the momentum of your persistence that ends up pushing you through that, because you have other people you're working with, you have just things going, things will come up online and you'll respond to it, and that momentum will keep you going and get you through those hard times. And it's kind of like riding a bicycle, right? Like, if you set your project out to be, I'm going to be number one, and we're going to win all the awards, and we're going to do all the stuff, and it's going to be totally awesome. It's sort of like like you're on a bicycle and you're starting in 6th gear, right?
Right. You're already defeated yourself.
I'm on the biggest gear, because the all the winners are using the biggest gear, and you see all these people going by on the bike super fast. They're all in their 6th gear, and they're like, well, I just got to ride this bike in 6th gear and I'll be like them. But you'll just fall over immediately, because you got to start small. You got to start humble. You got to like, embrace your failures and do things with the expectation of failure almost, it's gonna suck, but it's gonna be a little bit cool, and that's what I'm doing this for.
It'll be better next time.
Right. And you build up that momentum over time. You start on a really small gear, and it's just humble beginnings, right? But you're still pedaling, and you can pedal pretty easily because you don't have this huge weight on your shoulders and all this stress and anxiety of
music videos, it's like, we just had to start making them. It's like, now we're the place, we've made like 3 or 4 of them that we have a process, we kind of know what to do. But the first couple times we had no idea, right? And it's like, it can stop you if you don't know how to take the first step, right? But you just gotta you just got to do it. Even if like you don't really know what you're going out to film to start with.
Yeah. Accept that you don't know what you're doing, and accept that what you're going to do is, you know, it's not going to be up to whatever wild expectations you might have, but it's the journey of it, right? It's the discovery and it's the learning, and you get to the end of the journey and you're that much more prepared for the next one. That's going to be that much better.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's just no such thing as being excellent from ground zero. And and again, wrapping yourself up in the idea of it's got to look like X for me to be happy, because of all the things everybody in this world, all the people who are listening, myself, you guys, when you've accomplished something, you've achieved what you were originally shooting for, right? This whatever the success gem is that's sitting on top of this mountain. When you go and pick up that gem, you go, well, this doesn't feel so special. It's a crazy thing that we as humans, we wrap our nature around the goals of getting somewhere or discovering our purpose through the receipt of a gift of some kind, right? Because we've been on this long journey that we've earned the right to hold the gem. And it's always insanely dissatisfying to actually have achieved what you thought was success.
Yeah. I like that analogy too.
Me too. That's a really good one.
The gem seems a little too permanent though, right? Because the gift, you can have, you know, any sort of number of different kinds of gifts or whatever, right? But it's up to you to nurture it, right? And it's kind of like more like getting a plant, you know, as a gift, right? It's like, here you go. It's like, here's the beginning of a bonsai tree or something, right? And it's like, it's up to you to care for it and to either let it blossom or, you know, like carve it into what you need it to be, or just totally give up and ignore it and let it kind of wilt, right? And it'll wilt for a while, right? But until you're gone, it's never truly dead.
Well,
right?
yeah. And this is
It'll
so fascinating.
Keep wilting forever.
Yeah. I love what you're saying. This is really badass, because you guys are like great counselors. you should be social workers.
Giant ideas. That's what we do.
Yeah. I mean, I can't believe I'm supposed to have you on my show, and I'm like, would you guys tell me more about my failures so I can be better? But you know,
we got to listen.
Well, I think of the gem personally, and honestly, as you were speaking, my brain was telling me, why did I pick gem? and I think it's because what I want, and I'm sorry for making this about me at the moment, but what I want is to be able to say, see, I did this really, really difficult thing. Very few people do. And I achieved this goal of actually having this, you know, this thing that I can hold. And I can say, see, like, and I can show it to the world. Some like look at me thing. Right. Some totem, which is actually kind of pathetic.
I think everybody has that, right? Like that desire to have external validation, especially after putting so much work into something. It's like, even if you don't like the external validation in your mind, when people say you do a good job, you're still like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I think it also comes down to, how are you dispersing it? Are you sharing it, or are you selling it? Right? Are you
right?
You know, are you?
I think it's more about displaying it.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
right,
you know,
right. It's the trophy on the wall,
right? It's not just like you can display it, but if everyone laughs at it, then you're like, okay. But
well, true.
You know,
true,
like
true.
you want to have that connection with people, that validation that it's not just admiration. It's getting the message, you know, like whatever the art is that you're trying to do, it's conveying some sort of message. Sometimes it's just a sentence. Sometimes it's just a feeling or a theme or something like that. You're just trying to communicate something. And, you know, the success of the art is really on whether that message gets through.
Right.
Right.
And that's a tough one too, because again, when you live in a world with so much content and everybody chasing the squirrel through the hamster wheel, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We're all sort of trying to get somebody to pay attention to the thing we're creating. But why are we doing it in the first place? Are we doing it like in my case, and I'm not trying to again propel myself through your message, but I do this because I love music. I'm a lifelong musician. And when I hear great music, I want to prop it up. I want somebody else, I want my audience to go, oh, wow, Rob found a new band. And I can't wait to check it out. That's what this is for me. But I absolutely admit, embarrassingly so, that I want to be seen as a tastemaker. I want that. I want to be able to hold that and say, see what I did. I want my kids to say, Dad was relentless and never gave up, and he finally got there, whatever that is, which is totally insane. But that's my
it's like fulfillment.
Right. That's what I'm carrying with this sort of belief that, someday when I die, the world will rue the day they did not look at Rob Leland and say that man was special and he held the gems of the world's tallest peaks.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a good question is how satisfying can the Van Gogh experience be, right? Like
when you're cutting off an ear, it's pretty satisfying.
Well, the tortured artist, like his life was pretty brutal. He never saw any success that any of his art would later achieve after his death.
Yeah.
So, on one side, it's a tragedy because, you feel like he deserves to experience that recognition, right? Mm-hmm. But that's ultimately not what it's about. I would much prefer to have that experience or that lack of experience, I guess, than to be totally revered for doing something I didn't like, or that wasn't really that expression of that truth in me, right? Like
so good. Yeah.
Like I'm going playing some other, like some other bands playing some other music or
the Beatles cover band or something.
Well, yeah, like I don't know. I don't want to disparage Beatles,
I love
obviously,
Beatles, but I mean, like,
what's up with the Beatles, man?
And Beatles
or even awesome. Just cover bands in general. There's you can totally get artistic fulfillment from that. If that's what you set your goalposts as, right? And if that's what gives you that fulfillment, right? But I mean more like playing music becomes that job that you hate.
I get it. Yeah.
You're not in charge. You're doing what they're saying, it sucks, and then you go and get a bunch of awards for it and stuff. And it's like, I would much prefer to be Van Gogh than that.
Yeah.
Right. Is to do the art and to have it exist in the world, even if I don't get anything back from it, because at least it is the way that deep down I knew it had to be that way.
You felt the call that needed to exist, and you made it into a reality.
Yeah.
And at least there, you did it. It's there. It's in existence.
Yeah, you've imprinted humanity with your moment that even if it wasn't appreciated while you were there physically, that someday it'll resonate. Right.
Yeah.
And have you guys seen the movie The Old Guard with Charlize Theron?
No, not by name.
Okay, so
I think I might have. Yeah.
Okay, so listeners, they're
like super old, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're like thousands of years old. They're like they weren't born immortal, but they somehow ended up being immortal. It's never explained how. But then they can die, which is interesting. But so in other words, they're on the planet for an exceptionally long period of time. Like these people have been blessed or cursed with an incredible amount of longevity. And what I loved about the movie, and which is what applies here and to Van Gogh's experience or lack of, is that it's about people who don't know why they've been cursed with this longevity. They don't understand. But as they live through eons, they come to discover that their purpose is actually going to be come together in the future when they're gone. And that, in other words, that their life history, their experiences will affect 500 years down the road. And that's when their purpose will culminate in potentially the saving of mankind. And I love that idea. So personally, I agree with you. I would love to matter, if you will, down the road more than I care about mattering now, but I would like a little bite.
Right?
Yeah, well, of course, it's always
you
nice
matter to us.
I'm here, man.
You matter to us. Thank you so much for having us here, man.
Yeah,
We're making history here.
This is the weirdest interview I think you've probably ever done, and certainly the weirdest way I've ever started.
This is good.
It's a Monday.
You guys are insanely positive humans, so I have to ask this. So one, how did you meet? Because I think it's important. It certainly would be fun to hear a story, but two, were your parents, because artists tend to come from really two kinds of households. They come from highly encouraging or highly discouraging households. And I just certainly don't want to throw anyone under the bus, and I don't want to insinuate that your family was a total chaos and you erupted from it because you were the good guy that was going to survive it. But I'm curious where that fuel comes from, that positivity. So, give me a little breakdown before we talk about the new record. Give me a little breakdown about each of you and how did you discover each other, and how did you grow up?
Sure.
Okay, well, I was born first, so I guess I'll go first.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. So it's interesting you ask about parents because, so I grew up in a really good household. I love my parents. They are, ultimately so supportive of basically anything that I choose. And, they don't get the music thing, right? So I didn't grow up in a very musical household. My uncle would listen to like Foreigner and stuff, right? So I had a lot of classic rock roots growing up. And my mom was into some 80s stuff, like a lot of Eurythmics and stuff like that, right? So I have that as kind of a foundation, but music was always kind of a passing thing. It was, something to maybe put on in the car here or there. Nobody was really musicians in my family. With the exception, there's one exception. So I have an uncle on my mom's side, who was very musical. My mom grew up as a Jehovah's Witness. So they were actually, banned from playing musical instruments. Yep. There was no point. It was the end of the world was around the corner.
Yeah.
So,
I've heard that a lot.
You won't need music in heaven.
Yeah, it was a really super.
The world is always ending with JWs too. It's always ending.
Yeah, don't get me going on that, boy.
Sorry, folks. Yeah.
Anyways, long story short, he couldn't. He wasn't allowed any musical instruments, but he got a job at a music store, and he just taught himself how to play. This was in Penticton. Long time ago. And he hooked up with another musician in town called Mike Ranowski, and they formed a band. They started playing some music. It was going really well. And they described him as just, being able to just play anything that he touched. Right. So his name was Ken, and, he got to be about 16 or 17 and then started exhibiting some really weird behavior, and he got diagnosed with schizophrenia in the end. So they didn't really know what to do. They went back to England. That's where they were from. Did some therapies and stuff. And, it's just, he hasn't been the same ever since.
Oh my gosh. It's awful.
But, Ranowski went on and made Loverboy from.
Right. I was going to say, I know Penticton is that's where Mike started.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's just a cool connection that I've, my mom's always kind of raised me with that, like, oh, your uncle, he's that musician. Right. So he's really the only exception that I can think of on my mom's side and my dad's side that had any real sort of musical inkling. Wow. But, given that being his history, he wasn't really part of my life, especially growing up. It was, so I didn't really have any musical support as a musician. I was into it and I liked it. And, I got it as a birthday present because I asked for it. But, it wasn't really, it was really just my own soul little thing. And I would be growing up and all these musician friends around me, and they just be like playing like crazy, right? And I never really put myself up on that level, and I didn't really push myself to be better than them just because I wanted to be better than them. You know, I didn't really regard my skills in a comparison to theirs, because, you know, how I was going with my instrument was just different than how they were approaching it. Right. And I, you know, so over time, I just, you know, it went from the instrument and to composing. And eventually I found myself just on the computer composing, and the guitar was on the side of the room, just, you know, not part of the whole music making process at all. And, you know, it took a long time to get through all that, but, you know, the whole time through, it was never like, oh, we're going to get to this point, we're going to do this by this time. And, you know, it was always just, this is what made me happy to do. It's hard to describe, right? It's just, it was, you know, I would be feeling stressed out about something and I'd go to it and it would chill me out. Right. It's just doing something that you like and doing something that talks to your soul. You know, that's what pushes you through the project, right? Not, I'm going to be this or something like that.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm doing this with you guys because I love doing this, because I love talking to awesome musicians, people that I find fascinating, music that I find fascinating, and being able to connect on this sort of cellular level, because we sort of have the same, not talk tracks. I mean, we're very different people, but we understand the same things as creative people, that there's this yearning inside. And if you just pursue it and you let the purity of that pursuit occur versus like the weird ambition thing that we were talking about before, you actually create these gorgeous things because they can't be helped. They've been downloaded into you. And that guitar sitting off on the side was I wouldn't call it a tease. I would say it was your destiny. And that's a really beautiful thing. You know, the encouragement of accidents are not accidents, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, it you know, in hindsight, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I wouldn't have thought that that's where I'd end up, like starting on guitar and then eventually moving away from it's not that I'm moving away from it. It's just when it came to songwriting and composing and figuring out what to do on the guitar, I found myself distancing myself more and more from it, because I found the more I drilled into just the musicianship of just the guitar, and it turned into this big competition with all these other guitar players. And I'm like, well, you know, I don't care about tremoloing 20,000 notes in a second, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's, you know, and I did have moments where I was tempted, where I was like, maybe I should just, you know, just grind it out just for that purpose.
Sweet, bro. Just go do some sweeps.
Just sweeps all day. Me and Tosin Abasi, man, just all day.
But I love Tosin.
Oh, he's anybody doesn't know who Tosin is, look him up. Look him up.
So, like, this isn't disparaging that way of playing, right? Sure. And that method of, you know, musicianship, where it's kind of treated more athletically than it is musically, right? Like, you know, how crazy it is and how difficult it is to play, and how well you can pull it off kind of takes precedence to what it's actually doing inside and in the back of your head, and
the feelings it's creating.
So, you know, so that was propelling me through all these bands that I was in and stuff, right? So I started with these guys way back, like in high school. I was playing with these guys, and then we had a band for a few years. It was called Odd Child, and it was great. And we didn't care about being anything. And, you know, everyone's like, oh, you need radio songs. So we were like, we don't care. We're just going to make the music as it's going to flow through us. And our first song was 25 minutes long. It was our whole demo. It was just one track. Awesome. And it's like, there you go. And, you know, we weren't letting anybody try to dictate how we should be doing things. And we were just playing it from the heart from the beginning. Right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I started my whole band journey. And then, you know, that kind of came and went, and we had some other projects, and I was, you know, working with computers more, working with like visuals and projectors and stuff. And, you know, and then that got me back to this point where I was like, okay, I want to do, you know, a project on the scale that I hadn't done before, and I need to pull in the best help that I can. So I reached back to the Odd Child days, and I got the boys that I first started getting that musical connection with, right? Got them together, and we just started playing this music that I'd spent composing on my computer. And we were, you know, it was magic, right? It was just explosive. We were like, man, something's going on here. And I was convinced that we could never find a singer because, you know, locally, like I've been through that, so many bands and so much just, it can, And I just wanted to stay focused on the music because it was so powerful, right? So, you know, so we just kept going. My idea was to get the demo done as soon as we can, so we can like blast it out online and get, you know, hold huge auditions and, you know, like try to really find the absolute perfect person. And so
they got me instead.
I was gonna say, but they did. But you could throw yourself under the bus, but they did. They got a pretty awesome
how it works out, you know? Like because we were actually recording. We were putting the money down. We were getting the real recording done with the real, you know, the real deal. And, you know, that's what the focus was on. And I remember Dan, our drummer, he's like, you know, it's really important we start, you know, we got to find a singer. And I'm like, I don't think we're going to do it, but go ahead. Right. I wasn't going to stop him doing anything. So he put some posts online and then that's where our path kind of connects with him coming from Edmonton.
So
oh really? You came from Edmonton?
Yeah. I grew up in Edmonton. My family, my mom sung in a choir, my dad sung and played drums in a rock band, you know. Went to a Christian private school for the first like 9 years and went into, you know, high school completely unprepared for what high school actually is at that time. And I played in some bands in high school, some like punk bands, stuff like that. Did some, what do you call that? Battle of the Bands. But we were terrible, absolute garbage. But it was a lot of fun, you know. And it's where you get your roots. And then when I was a little bit older, 19 maybe, joined a progressive rock band, Distant Calm, and we played for maybe 2 or 3 years. Things were going great, and then my drummer and my guitarist both had children within accidentally within like a month of each other. It just happened.
Both got the curse
accidentally.
I don't know how it happened, but so that happened, and then our band kind of drifted apart, and I did like my own solo thing for a while. And then my sister moved to BC, and my sister's my vocal coach, right? Her name's Carolyn Quinn. Wow. She helps, like, she does the vocal coaching for Singer of Mother, a bunch of like other big bands and that kind of stuff. Okay. So she moved to Vancouver, and she's like, "Hey, you should come out here." And I was like, "Cool, think." So like I did like a trip down to California. I got to see Gojira live down there. I got to see all my favorite bands. I got to see all my favorite bands. Came up and I was like, "Okay, you know what? I'm dropping everything. I'm dropping my job. I have $2,000. I'm moving to BC." Wow. So I moved to BC with no job. I have like a place to live that I just found a couple days before. I'm living on this church, on this like church property in this guy's the pastor's basement, right? Working at it's just a coffee shop like half a block away, right? Making not enough money to pay my bills, going in debt each month. But I'm like, I'm here for a reason. I'm going to find a band. I find these guys. I find this advertisement on Craigslist, and it's like looking for a lead singer that's into costumes, projectors, progressive music. I'll hit all my buttons, right?
I think we said we need our Freddie Mercury / Maynard.
Something like, yeah,
which exactly. Is the perfect combination of frontmen.
Yeah. It just conjured him.
So for some reason inside, I was like, you know what? I can't do one of these bands again. You know, they're amazing, but I gotta earn some money. You know, I did some like 80s cover rock band for like 2 gigs, and they fired me, and I was like, you know what? Fine. I'm going to join this band, Hunting Giants at that time.
Didn't have a name then, no.
What I did is I went online, and they had 2 tracks online. So I used my streaming software, OBS, to capture their audio.
Right.
Then I used Pro Tools to to actually make my own vocals for the song, like multi-tracked, and then I sent it them in their email as an application, just being like, I want to be your singer.
Wow.
And
that is legit.
I wanted that shit. I saw that song and I was like,
story.
this is it. This is it. This is it. So I after about like 2 weeks, you know, we meet up at a Tim Hortons and we're like, okay.
Well, I should say too, because I remember this. I remember vividly, like seeing the message that Dan put in the chat too.
Sure.
And you got to understand at that point, this isn't the first guy that he'd brought to us, and it wasn't going well up to that point. His track record with bringing us some ideas was like, no, man. And, you know, the best that we could hope for was like, oh, here's a track from like one of his other bands or something like that. Right.
Right.
And so then, you know, Dan puts in the chat, he's like, oh, you got to hear this new guy. This is crazy. Right. And I'm like, and I went into it so biased. I remember like just being like, oh, I want to say no so bad. I don't even know why. It was just, you know, like I didn't think, I kind of thought it was a waste of time. Like we had to focus on our recordings, right? Like we weren't going to get that lucky. There's no way.
No way.
And then, you know, I was actually in the bathroom when I was on the toilet. I remember, and I'm like, okay, here we go. And it's like echoing through the bathroom, and like these vocals come through, and I'm like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Because it sounds it sounds like he like, yeah, that's crazy. And listen through it, and so that track was
in the water. It
was funny that you said something in the water earlier. I was like,
off our first EP.
It's off our first EP. That was the very first song that we wrote, actually.
That was like,
in the water.
I met these guys in early October, and it was early November. They already booked my vocals in with the producer. So I had to write 5 songs. I had to write all the backing vocals and the lyrics and the melodies for 5 songs in a month.
Yeah, I was convinced pretty well. It was great.
It just came out like without.
I went from
filter.
Totally biased against to like 100% like we need to get this guy. So then it was just, and we're just like, okay, like we've done drums. We're halfway through bass right now. We're starting guitar in a week and a half. See what you can do, and just put him through the ringer. It was crazy. He was like just rewrites on the fly, right? Like it's just exactly.
They're like, okay, we're cutting 2 bars here, and I have all these lyrics. I'm like, okay, I gotta throw 2 of these out. Throw in this one. Throw in this one.
Yeah, it was super, but it ended up just.
Oh my god!
Yeah,
in the middle,
it was really cool.
In the middle of our recording, we went to go see Animals as Leaders, and
talk about Tosin Abasi, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, exactly. Oh my god,
it was a Periphery show.
It was Periphery and Animals as Leaders,
and Animals opened, and
they were so good. There's one part that's like guitar descended from the ceiling and like kind of just locked onto him, and he just like woo.
I mean, Periphery was.
I've seen him once, but it was mind blowing. They actually Devin Townsend of all people opened for Animals as Leaders.
Love that man.
Which was just an insane show. Insane.
I love Heavy Debbie, man.
Oh yeah, for sure. Too. Anyways, I go to the Down in the Pit for what was the band? Periphery. Yeah, I'm in the pit for Periphery, and you know maybe some.
How long did we know
smoking
you at
this or that? Sorry,
it was like we only knew you for like.
Yeah, when was this? How long ago was this?
So this was 2017.
Yeah, the end of 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this was November 2017. We went to the Periphery show. Right, it was the day before we were going to record the vocals for Extinction, I'm pretty sure, which is one of the songs off our EP. And I'm down there in the pit, and I try to get through these people, and they're not letting me out. I'm like, shit, man, I got to get out of here. Like, seriously, it's getting violent in here, right? I'm like, no, okay, I'm trying to get out. I pushed past these guys, and they didn't want me to push. So I turn around, and someone took a beer bottle and just hucked it at my face right here and just smashed.
I thought it was a whiskey bottle.
I don't even know what it was.
I'm pretty sure it was a whiskey bottle.
That's not even kind of fair.
Oh, no.
It was just someone just threw it into the crowd.
Yeah.
Just some, piece of work.
So I'm like, I'm outside the pit trying to get through the pit while there's blood streaming all over my face. I'm able to like crawl my way to like the lounge, the beginning, like the entrance area. Yeah, the foyer. And that's when the security guards are able to round up the rest of my band members, right?
Yeah, they actually knew who. I don't know how they figured it out, but they went straight to it was me and Corey.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, you got that friend, right? Like, I think he's in the front and he's got, we're like, what? So we go and he's just white. He's just like,
oh yeah.
Like,
just covered with blood, pale. And that's how,
Did you get photos?
I don't know.
Oh, shit.
I think Corey might have some.
I had photos of the show, but once that, I don't know.
That's how you know it's love.
It was
exactly. And I remember they were
yeah.
cleaning the blood off my face.
Yeah.
Only meeting these guys for a month, right? Like it's Band of Brothers, right? It's a band. So like they're cleaning the blood off my face. They take me to the hospital, right? And we get like the stitches on all over, all good. Come out and like the next
4
day,
a.m. or it took
all night. The next day, I was finishing writing all the lyrics for Extinction. I didn't have a shower. I was still covered in my blood, and I was like, that's where Extinction, the last chunk of it comes from, was this like out of my mind delirious state.
Crazy.
Just allowing it to flow.
Yeah, that song was crazy. It's our longest song.
Yeah.
Sure. And it's your Cygnus X1.
Yeah. I mean, looking at the next set of material, it's probably going to be our longest song for a while.
Wow.
But it built up, and it was actually the one that we were least prepared for going into the studio with. It was more just like we had the bulk of it, right? But we weren't exactly sure how everything and there's a whole piano beginning part of it. And we just riffed on it. We had tons of fun with that song.
Yeah, so that's how we met and created our band relationship.
One of our first memories together. Yeah,
absolutely.
That's beautiful stuff. Yeah. Well, again, it shows that it's meant to be, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm so blown away by that story. I don't know if I have a question that can sort of bring out anything cooler about your guys' experience as a band. I mean, that's some weird stuff. Some wild, wacky stuff.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I know you're here to talk about mythos. At least, we should. At least we should.
Maybe.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's really nice to have these
fun
personal,
until now.
Yeah, we've had this personal, private conversation that we're sharing with the world, but now we got to talk about the band.
But I'd love to.
Yeah. I'd love to know how that really all came together, and really, I guess my main question about the album is, typically albums are titled as such because they mean something, right? Whether it's a concept record or, something from an experience, and somebody says this, seems to suit this, this collection of songs really well. But, listening to your early days, listening to, the fact that, growing up in these religious households or going to a private Christian school or whatever, obviously can deeply impact people in both positive and negative ways, right? Because of the isms that come with growing up in those sort of structures. And so I guess what I would ask, I'm curious because I've never really considered it until just now, is the record and is the title, all these titles basically having to do with yourselves, that these are sort of your life experiences sort of wrapped up in bubbles of 3 to 21 minute long songs?
Well, life is a journey. Yeah. Right? I guess that's a good way of encapsulating the idea. Like, our demo EP album, whatever you want to call it, it was Skyward Eyes 2018, 5 tracks. It was almost a rite of passage. It was like a boot camp kind of situation, as we've described. It was hectic. It was chaotic. It was, we didn't have a name at that point even. Right. The group as it is right now just didn't exist. It was all these different things that were just kind of happening, and we're, working with it the best we can. And, the work is a reflection of that for sure. But it's once we were able to put that behind us and really look forward,
we were able to plan
we
for
were
this
together
next one,
as this unit. We were one, right? And and we were pushing forward from there. And so then it was this opportunity now to have at the beginning of this whole writing process to have Steven, the vocalist, be part of that, be, you know, part of the whole whirlwind of sharing riff ideas and putting this and that together, and then getting idea, oh, maybe we should put this over here, you know, and then having that be seated in him the entire way through, and he's building, and he's not like, you know, cramming out lyrics in 3 weeks kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it was so nice to be able to have the time to like I've really been into Carl Jung for most of my life, like when 19 years old, older, that kind of stuff, you know, archetypes, really into that kind of stuff. Mythos for me, like I read you know, Joseph Campbell's Hero with 1,000 Faces.
I knew you were going to go to Campbell, man.
absolutely and there's where else would I go?
I know.
And there's like obviously the universal story, in a sense that, you know, every story or these stories share these archetypical lenses. It's just how you look at it. So that's what mythos is for me. It's like a mythos is a framework of archetypes and stories that a culture has. So it's like I wanted to put my own ideas of how you can live life, and by believing in those values that these people hold in these songs, it leads you towards certain ends. Like I wanted to celebrate heroism, but I also wanted to get in the mind of someone who's self-destructive and self-loathing, like rituals, right? You have all these are slivers of people, of archetypes, of ideas that all collect in like a multifaceted whole. So yeah, just how different people live, what they believe, and how that leads them. Like we got Too Big to Kill. Main theme in that is like a hunter becomes the hunted. But why? Because his aggression is out of check. He eats and consumes and destroys and kills everything. And there's only one end for someone who does that, and that's to get killed themselves. Yeah. Right? They will be slayed. There's always a bigger fish. Yeah. You know? Yeah. So that's the idea, at least for us, for mythos, where the concepts come from.
Wow. Yeah. And you know, to me, it's really like Skyward Eyes was the testing ground. It's kind of like just getting a whole bunch of stuff together and then, you know, adding a match and see if it blows up. Right. And that was a pretty big explosion. It's like, okay, well, now that we know that we can do this, what can we do with it? You know? And it's like, okay, let's put it into a cylinder and put a nozzle on it and create some rocket or something, right? Like it's much more
refined.
Yeah, like it's crafted. It feels much more crafted because it was from the outset, from the beginning. We all knew who we were, what we were doing, what we were setting out to do, you know, and then we went forward with it, right?
And we had like 2 extra years to do a lot of the recording, because it was actually going to come out in 2020, late 2020. Mythos was right, but you know, we had the coronavirus pandemic, so it shut down live music for 2 years, and so we thought, let's just take our time. We literally took like 6 to 8 weeks just for the vocals. You know,
in hindsight, it's like I want to do every album that way.
It was like, there's so little stress. It was just way better.
And going back to what we were saying about putting these expectations on you, and it's like, oh, if you don't do it,
it has to be out 2020. It has to be out. We have to do it.
And then it just all that dissolved, and we're like, okay, well, we literally have nothing else to do other than just keep working on it, you know. And it's never going to be perfect. The music will never be perfect. So you can just persistently work on it, right? Yeah. You got to get to this point where it's like, okay, it's good enough. It's got to go out, right? And we got to that even after working on it for like years now. At those last moments, we're still, this could, you know, maybe we should, you know. It's like, no, just
Yeah, there also comes a time you just have to press the button.
Yeah.
You're like, nope, I don't care. Yeah. I don't care what you hear. We're not doing any more balancing. It's done.
Yeah. 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 That's you got to feed that into the next project.
Yeah. Yeah. COVID is a weird thing and how it affected everybody. I mean, obviously it, you know, killed a lot of people. It terrified a lot of people. It completely upset the balance of how we behave in so many ways. And yet there's all these great things where I would call them reminders, right? it forced us in so many ways to slow down and reconsider our direction, to reconsider how much work we put in, to reconsider our families, to reconsider what's important, right? Is money important? Is ambition? Is fame? Is success? Is a car, right? What is it we're seeking? And I love that it slowed you guys down enough to, again, take 6 to 8 weeks on vocals and to really put together a record that has the actual stamp of the four of you, because it gave you the time, right, Steve? It gave you the time to actually jump in and be a member, not a the new guy or a hired gun or whatever. And that's such a big deal, man.
Yeah. For sure.
Good stuff. It's good stuff. I want to ask you one more question. I know we could talk forever, but I also know it's very late. We should probably it's been going for a while.
This has been amazing though. Thank you so much, Rob. This has been so much fun.
Yeah.
Look, I'm going to say this. I'll say this to you guys, and I'll say it on camera. I'll say it on audio. I would love to have you back like really, really, really soon and do a part 2 or even a part 3, because honestly, these are the kind of things that I cherish more than anything. I cherish these moments of real connection with people that I genuinely enjoy, that I'm sort of wowed by who they are. And their musical capabilities notwithstanding, what makes you guys amazing is your transparency and your clarity. And as I mentioned before, your kindness. So I am deeply satisfied today. And to be very frank, I have had an extraordinarily awful 2 to 3 days, and I needed this so bad.
I'm so sorry,
it's okay, but to feel whole again by connecting with other people in this way. It's not, I'm not assuming you're not whole, but it's so nice that you guys brought this beautiful, complex human moment to me today. I've talked about myself so much, so I'm going to stop. But
it's fine.
So great, but you're supposed to. But I'm so grateful for this experience today. I really feel like I made 2 friends today, and that's lovely. So thank you.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob.
Yeah,
it was a lot of fun.
Good. So let me ask this question. This is almost a ending on a negative thing. So I want to be cautious in how I address this. But
sure.
Here's the reality. I started this show 6 years ago because I wanted to lift up bands, right? I wanted to meet cool people. I wanted to rub shoulders with celebrities. I wanted all those things. But I've discovered over the last 2 years, and specifically really because of COVID reset my show as well. And I found that a friend of mine said to me not long ago, he said, "You know why your show's so good?" He said, "Because your show, you come in and you punch the souls of these people you talk to. It's like you punch their gut, but it's like you go right through them, and they're forced to confront themselves in new ways because you don't ask them safe questions. You ask them personal questions. You ask them questions that frustrate. You ask them, right? You push their buttons, and we have a real conversation." So all that being said, I think they listen to my show, I believe, because they're curious how people overcome difficulty, life difficulty, right? Just how do we overcome a moment that is truly challenging? And I'm not suggesting that you guys have had these awful moments or that you even want to share them. But was there ever a moment where you were trying so hard as a band and maybe realize that, you know what? I don't know if anybody cares. Will anybody notice what we're creating? Where maybe you start to feel a little bit down on yourself or down on your direction. And then there's a moment where you said, you know what? I gotta switch this up because I want people to pay attention because what I have to say is actually important. And I also need to reset myself. Did that ever happen to you guys? And if it did, how did you overcome it?
Well, I'd say I started with the whole band thing about 25 years ago, and I reached that point that you're describing about 24 and a half years ago.
Wow.
It was,
That'll do it.
just, it's part of that, all the expectation talk, I talk about that because that's what I did at the beginning. And I had these, and it's like, it's going to be this, or it's a failure, or, it's, you just, you put that on yourself. Right. So,
right.
Yeah. Like, for a specific example for myself, I kind of talked about it, but like when my last band from Edmonton, we had so many songs, everything was going great, and these guys were my brothers, and we were going to record an album, and it was going to be amazing. And then it all just fell apart. And I lost all those songs, all that meaning, all that love I poured into everything. It just disintegrated overnight. Right. Because we didn't even have an album, like we had an EP, but all those songs went. And so I'm just sitting there, right? Like 22 years old, but like, my band just dissolved, and I feel like, well, what am I going to do now? Like, I put all my life into this and it's gone. I remember for myself, I was like, I'm never going to join a band again. I have to do this by myself, all me, cause I can never trust another, have faith in another band that this is going to happen again. But I guess as I get older, it's like, well, I can't help what things are going to happen in the future.
Right. You have to respond. Like,
yeah, exactly. So by cutting music off, just off the off chance that something I make is going to get disintegrated, well, everything is going to get disintegrated. It's like,
and like, to me, it's absolutely. It's you putting these expectations into it. And then when they don't come true, then you get to this point where you're like, it makes me want to give up. Right. Yeah. And I got to that point where I'm just like, it's not worth all the effort put into it. It's not worth it. Right. And I accepted that, and I'm like, okay, well then I'm going to give up trying to do that. I'm just, so then it's like, okay, well, what else is in my life? And music is, it's magnetism, right? Mm-hmm. You just end up going back, and I'm like, well, no. And I was like resisting going back to it because I'm like, no, I went down there and it sucked.
It burned me.
Screw that, right? But at the end of the day, I ended up just falling fully back into it because I didn't care. I wasn't doing it for any of that. I'm like, if I, you win the billionaire lottery, like money is absolutely no option, right? What would you do? I'm like, I'd be back in the studio again, I found that in myself, and I found that as a truth in myself that was completely honest. And that's what drives me toward, it doesn't, like, I'm kind of reserved in the idea that I'll never get recognition for any of this. Right. Mm-hmm. Like, it's fine. If that's the future that's in front of me, then it doesn't change my choice to do it. I'm not going to get to the end and be like, nobody took notice, so I regret it all. No, I don't regret it, because it's what I found, what I really needed to do to make myself happy to begin with. Right.
Yeah. But you know what? I'm going to say this right in front of you. Meeting you both today has affected me profoundly. Fantastic. In a personal, professional, in a loving, in a kind, in a challenging way. And so I would, not that you need encouragement, because you're doing just fine.
We all do.
But yeah, you guys today have mattered and mattered so much to just me, let alone anybody that hears this. And I have a nice audience that will hear this. Oh. And that's the key, right? That's the key. I mean, first of all, when you almost quit 24 and a half years ago and said, like, you know what I mean? I mean, first of all, you were a kid, so, right. Come on, get over it. But you went back to it because one, you're compelled, and two, because you truly love it. It's like, what else are you going to do, man? Go and be you, be the best you. And then years and years later, you two connect. The rest of the band comes together. Hunting Giants puts out a new record, and little Rob in Snoqualmie, Washington, 30 miles east of Seattle, says, wow, I really like this. I should check this out. And I call John and say, John, can you hook me up? And then here we are talking. And then I discover these two lovely souls who have, in a way, impacted me enough today to change my world today. And that changing of my world today is enough. It's enough. Like you guys, like your existence, if this were based on like a scale thing of like, if God's like, oh, you know what, if your purpose is in the impact of life, well, you impacted my life. Holy crap, that's so awesome.
You impacted ours too. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we needed it too.
Yeah, absolutely. This was an amazing conversation.
Right?
Thank you so much for having us and being free and open. You know, I can tell. You know, it's great.
Yeah, and not being afraid to go into depth about things. Right? We have these conversations all the time, and it's like, it needs to be talked about more.
Yeah.
Right?
One thing I could say to like someone who's trying to overcome like a failure or something that they perceive as a failure is like, no matter like what happens throughout the past bands, let's say for myself, right? As we go along in life, we're always learning new skills through these failures too. Right. Like even if, you know, this band disintegrates or something like that, we're all learning skills that we can apply to everything, anything else, you know, in our life, including other music. But no matter what you think you're failing at, you're learning a lot as you go along. And that learning will lead you to the goal that you're actually pursuing and magnetizing towards yourself by not giving up. Go.